And we're back. I'm Anthony Fury filling in for Brian Lilly. Remembrance Day is this coming Sunday. Every year we don our poppies, attend memorial services, and take a moment of silence to remember, particularly to remember those we lost. But not everyone is entirely sold on how we treat Remembrance Day. They're not so hot on the way we approach our military in general. In an opinion piece in the Winnipeg weekly The Uniter, read mostly by students, local radio host Michael Welch shared his concerns with Remembrance Day. His piece concluded with, "I will refrain this year from wearing the traditional red poppy, with all its associations with military pageantry. I will instead wear the white peace poppy." Welch joins me now to discuss his views on this. Michael, thanks for joining us. So I want to ask you off the bat, what has brought you to have this perspective?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Anthony. I should probably just point out, first of all, that I am coming at this from the perspective of somebody who has actually been, has a long history of activism against war. And I personally, I have a grandfather who fought in the First World War as well. I have traditionally honored Remembrance Day going way back. Because I had come to that view that was basically impressed on me in my youth, that war and militarism was something to be shunned, that it's actually something that we should not be celebrating at all, exactly. And I find that if you read the actual piece that I wrote for the Uniter, that I opened it up with a basically reflection on the origins of Remembrance Day, which was originally known as Armistice Day, because it was signed, it was the armistice that was signed that put an end to war. It was basically a day to celebrate peace and not war. And I guess what I felt particularly over the last few years, is that increasingly there's a sense that we're moving away from that sentiment of lest we forget and never again, and that war is something that we should be trying our best to avoid. And it's being more and more about a celebration of that, of a military or militaristic viewpoint.
Can you give me some concrete examples of how that's been recurring these past couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one example that comes quickly to mind, just a couple of days ago, I believe it was the Seattle Times had a story about how Veterans for Peace, which is a peace group but made up of people who are who have a record of military service, and they were not allowed to march in this upcoming Saturday's Veterans Parade. And the reasons given were that they were their message was inconsistent with the actual, with the theme of honorably honoring or positively honoring the military veterans. And it's strange because these people are veterans.
Shouldn't an example like that maybe be cause for people like yourself and I to double down and reappropriate it and wear our poppies with pride? Because I think a lot of people would say that they actually are viewing it to really honor and respect the people who have died and who have served, regardless of any current political activities.
Yeah, well, like I say, I have been involved with peace movement and peace activism for some time now, and I find that many of the concerns that we've tried to raise more recently about the military operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, more recently Libya and Syria, I have come to the viewpoint that we're not really getting the straight goods on those sorts of conflicts, and it becomes harder to make the case when you have, particularly the current government, just using Remembrance Day and the whole business about honoring the soldier and using that to kind of discredit people who are putting forward a different kind of message, saying that it's
How
wrong
is that
for us to go
happening
into
in
war.
Canada, though? I know you gave an example in Seattle as one particular. I'm not clear on how that's happening in Canada.
Well, I'd say that first of all, when we look at the way that the treatment of people who are Iraq war resistors, for example, people who deserted the Iraq war, like Joshua Key. I've got a copy of his book with me. Joshua Key has not been treated very well at all by the
because he's a war resistor and a war deserter, and
he
the
deserted
U.S.
the
has
Iraq
asked
War
for him back. Yeah.
Yeah, he deserted the Iraq War for conscientious reasons. I mean, he was not simply following orders. And as he outlines in the book, there were valid reasons for not wanting to participate. They didn't want to participate in what effectively were violations of the Geneva Conventions.
Okay, I wouldn't doubt any of that, but Canada, I don't think, is being disrespectful and abusing high schoolers simply because they are not going to fight the U.S. over whether or not they comply with their orders to return war deserters.
Well, I think that
we don't need a war with the U.S. You know, as you say, we have enough conflicts going on right now.
Yeah, well, in the case, like, we're not, for example, in the era of the Vietnam War, Canada took a distinct position from that of the United States, and people who came to this country looking for sanctuary were allowed to stay here. And in the case of Iraq, it's not the case. We've seen one after another being sent back to serve lengthy prison sentences. But I mean, I don't necessarily, I mean, it is largely a separate issue, but I feel that there is increasingly this sentiment out there that if you are too critical of the war, that if you're critical, and I think it's pretty clear from pronouncements by our current government, when we see people like John Baird, criticizing, basically ending our diplomatic relations with Iran, when we see the buildup of military infrastructure, the contributions to the military-industrial complex, this idea that we're putting more and more of an emphasis on war making and war fighting, and too much support for these military missions abroad.
Michael, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. We're out of time, but I appreciate you joining us to tell us your story there. Yeah. And folks, you can check out Michael's piece at the website for the Uniter. You can listen to him.
And also, happy National Aboriginal Veterans Day.
Thank you. You too. All right. That's Michael Welch, who will not be wearing the poppy on Remembrance Day for reasons that he just said. So send me your thoughts on that. Do you agree with his views on how Remembrance Day has been appropriated? If I know the regular viewers, I'm going to say you don't. So you can send me your emails on that at anthony.fury@sunmedia.ca.